Hello, and welcome to my presentation about what scraping taught me about the importance of HTML. I would like to start with a couple of things about me. Hi, my name is Sara. I'm a software engineer from Slovenia, which is like a really small country in Europe. I am currently working with Linux, former Clean Shelf, where we try to get as many information about web services for our for how companies are using it, and scraping is one of the things that we use to get that. And since we scraped multiple sites, I have learned that a couple of things, and I would like to present of the current stage of the HTML, specifically about the semantics of it. And on the end, I would like to present of why the semantic HTML is actually important. But let's first start with actually what is a semantic HTML. In linguistics, you have a lot of subdisciplines, and the semantics actually deals with the meaning. So it starts with the meaning of the word, for example, what's an orange, and then goes to the meaning of the sentence, phrases, sentences, paragraphs, and so on. So when we talk about the semantic HTML, we talk about the HTML that actually has a meaning. We can start with using the right elements, for example, a button being a button, or the form being a form, or a table being a table. Or we can then go forward with how we're using classes. Are we using the right attributes? Are we using area roles, and so on. What is maybe different between the human languages that linguistics studies and HTML is that the human languages do have the implicit advantage because they only have to be understood among the agents that are relatively similar, humans, while the HTML has to be understood by two very different agents, both humans and the machines. So when we talk about semantic web, we talk about how to actually write an HTML with a meaning that both of humans and computers can easily understand. So while semantic webs is usually talked about in different areas, accessibility seems to be one of the most popular one. I want to talk about most of it in a concept of scraping, simply because this is the one that I think that semantic web can also help, and it's the one that I'm most familiar with. When I started as a junior developer and had to do my first scraping websites, this is my first advice that I got, and also the only advice that I got. Never ever use Angular tags or classes or anything connected to that, because Angular changes way too quickly and we'll have to correct the code all the time. If possible, try to find out the area attributes, because these are connected to accessibility, and these rarely change. Area attributes for a button would not change even if the element or the classes or the any other attributes are going to change. The problem with that advice was that area attributes are still not widely used. So then I'm gonna talk. So now we're gonna go to what I discovered about HTML through the scraping. The first thing is that people still don't use semantically best HTMLs for things. HTML now with the version 5 has over 100 elements that can be used for anything. Some of them are classical ones that exist from the very beginning, from title to paragraph to header. Some of them are pretty self-descriptive, even though they may have come later, like a navigation or footer. They're also user-specific, like, for example, time, so you can do both machine-readable and human-readable time at the same time, or maybe Ruby. If you're learning any East Asian language, you would be familiar with that, because this is how you would show on a web page how a certain word is read for the people that are not yet fluent in the language. And you also have things like video or audio. There are also some weird ones, like you can semantically show with the HTML of the text which one was deleted or which one was inserted, or even say this would be a good word break even though it doesn't look like it. But this is still ignored in the most cases. The most frequent failures in this regard that I see is that buttons are still a lot of time inputs, or in sometimes links, or in sometimes a link with an input in it. That the navigations are a lot of times still the div element with just lists inside of it, and these lists usually have links links or buttons in it. And while the table is frequently used, you can still a lot of times see the table created entirely out of div elements. There are also some interesting cases. For example, I once encountered a way to download a file by clicking on a form. So there wouldn't even be any input. You would just click on the element with the form and it would look like a link. And another interesting one was when they mixed the tables for presentation in data. So there would be like a layout table, inside of them would be a data table, and the last row would be another presentation table. And if you saw the last element, that would be like the link to the next page. The next thing is that ARIA elements are still frequently missing. They're in a lot of cases, they're like entire pages where there are no ARIA elements present at all, which can make it for a less accessible site, and it also can make it for a less for a harder scraping. I really wish the ARIA elements could be more frequently used, even though the first rule of the area is that if there is a native HTML element that can do the same thing, use that instead of an area element. But as we can see in the previous point, that is not always used. The third one was sometimes meaningful attributes or values are not used. That can include the class's name, that could in some cases be just random letters or numbers, or the more frequently 1 or 2 letters and 1 or 2 numbers. So you would get MB0 or P4 or things like that for the class's name. They are also frequently, you can see classes that are just CSS and then random numbers. I also see an example of a couple of sites where it was just divs and just classes that started with CSS and random numbers. But they are some examples of good names. You could see in a couple of forms of how they use the name attributes to actually meaningfully describe what is happening, or they use the class's name that actually tells you what is inside of that element. One that doesn't actually then provides a valid HTML is a lot of times we had to correct the code because not a lot of times, but a couple of times we had to correct the code because they would introduce multiple elements with the same ID value, even though the ID value wouldn't change. So we would need to go back and say, no, just use the element with this ID value inside of that other element, which is something that doesn't even create a valid HTML. They also, when you're scraping, you notice there are a lot of random changes in elements and attributes. Most of them are random. The second most frequent one tends to be that a lot of elements are moving to div, which is actually a step in the wrong direction because they make the entire page less meaningful. I could see both buttons and inputs and labels move to div. One positive one, and it's the most frequent one, that for the buttons, we are moving from inputs to buttons. So this is definitely a step in the right direction, even if it makes us change the code from time to time. But one of the most annoying things that you can have while scraping is the navigation that is not accessible through the web page address. That means that you can still see in a lot of pages that the only way to actually access the sub navigation would be to first click on the right button in the navigation. Then the JavaScript would create the actual buttons of where you can go. And then you could click on that and then it would refresh in the same page. That can be quite annoying, even for non-scraping scenarios. If you always want to change the same site, you always have to go through the clicking instead of just bookmarking the web address. But on the end of the day, the app is either the official one that the companies publish, or the one that the companies are using on their websites are usually still the more stable ones. Instead of parsing the HTML, it's usually still a better solution to simply catch the whatever response they're sending to the front end and just parse that. The reason is that usually it changes less frequently, though there are examples of sites that they change that on like monthly basis. But it's also usually easier parsable simply because the HTML is not usually structured in a very semantic way. So it's easier to find something in the JSON that they return that you need than in the actual HTML. And most of the websites still that we scrape still doesn't use backend rendering. So most of these sites are sending the data through JSON, in very rare cases with something else. And while it's a set state on the end, this is usually a more stable solution and the one that we usually try to implement. But why exactly is this semantic HTML important? Because I imagine a lot of people are thinking that scraping is something most of the websites would want to avoid, not encourage. So wouldn't making a less semantic HTML be important? The problem is that as long as HTML is relatively stable, as long as it doesn't change frequently, the people that want to scrape will still be able to find that data. They'll just make their code a lot less readable because you would be clicking on a lot of inputs or scraping a lot of divs with weird classes name. But semantic web is important for a couple of other reasons, and I would like to present 3 of them in the next couple of minutes. The first reason why the semantic HTML is important is accessibility. The example that I hear the most are screen readers. Screen readers has a lot of abilities to navigate the web page, which can only come into effect if the if the HTML is semantic, they have a lot of navigations. For example, they have navigations that can easily find the navigations elements. They have navigations by the header. They have navigations by the links and so on, and the paragraph. So they can also skim the page and not just listen all of it like you would expect to be the most normal case. There is also a reader mode for everybody who has problems with, I don't know, vertigo or maybe just stress and tiredness, or also makes it easier cognitively for people to use it, which also requires some of the semantic HTML to be present. You also have a custom CSS sheets, which are used for people that have problems seeing, so they need higher contrast, or they color blind and make sure that the colors that they can actually perceive are used, or because they need larger fonts and so on. It also, semantic webs makes it easier for the older browsers and for the text-only browsers to work. And it's important to support older browsers because, for example, the Chromebooks are linked to a specific version of Chrome, and you can't update it. So if we make a web that works for older browsers, that means these laptops will be able to work, will be able to be usable for a longer time, and that will also provide less e-waste for us to deal with in the future. The second reason I would like to talk about is having the one source of truth. In the currently developer practice is you have the HTML that people are using, and you have the API that machines or the other developers can access. But as long as you have two representations, if you don't have users on both of them, a lot of problems can go up undetected, which can make frustrations for the users of that different mood, which can make you won't get users to find out the problem for that one. One interesting things in this space is dealing with the micro formats, which they try to introduce to the HTML a couple of other attributes and standards in order to make the websites more parsable. Yeah, they are entire sites of recipes that are marked like that, and therefore immediately machine readable. In the web, this is used to create social things, like you can RSVP to an event, or you can send a reply or like or bookmark with just putting something on top of the semantic HTML to make it even more semantic and to actually show the machines what you meant. And the third reason is the principles. The World Wide Web Consortium has a lot of principles. They have, for example, the end user is the priority, or they have the ethical design principles, web design principles, and HTML design principles. And all of them has some of the very similar threads in it. And the ones that are most important for the semantic web is that internet is for everybody. So regardless of the device or of the cognitive ability or of the race or country or location or any other things that you can think of, internet should be accessible in the same way to everybody. And the other one is that users are a lot of time put first. The needs of the end users are always put above the needs of the developer, which again are supposed to be put above the needs of the browsers and specifications and so on. But I think the one that most tightly goes with the semantic HTML is the principle of people should be able to render content on the web as they want. That basically means that if they want to block, I don't know, the advertisement on Facebook, or if they want to block the recommendations on specific sites I accept, or if they want to use their own custom CSS or so on, the internet should allow them to do that. And it's very easy to allow them to do that as long as you use the semantic HTML. So even if you do want to stop the scraping, there is a lot of better ways to do that, and not by using a very non-semantic HTML. And I hope that I managed to make you think about that. Maybe this is something we, as a developer community, should be thinking about, because there is a lot of reasons why semantic HTML could help a lot of people use the web on the way that they want. Thank you for listening.